Hey guys, my name is Nabiri, and for this Synth Saturday I've just made a build up and I wanted to show it with you guys and tear it down, build it up from scratch and show you what I've done in the process. So we're just gonna start all the way from the top and walk our way down through the layers. And I've started off with the percussion on this instance, and in the end I'm just adding some extra things to spice up the build up a little bit. So what we're starting off with is just a plain snare. As you can see, it's just a plain drummers on snare, and I just routed that to a mixer channel. And on this mixer channel I have a channel strip that I just have pre-made, and I always put this channel strip on all my snares. And what this helps me with is whenever I make a track, I can just put on this channel strip and don't really have to worry about that mix down of the snare anymore. So I really just tend to use this for all my tracks. And without this channel strip, it just sounds like a plain snare, like this. But with the channel strip, it just gains a little bit more loudness, so it changes into this. So that's a little bit more loud, and that really helps you putting the snare in front of the mix without having to put the volume too loud. So with this channel strip, I'm just going to walk you through the entire layering. It's just starting off with some basic EQ, and this basic EQ is just boosting that root frequency of the snare. So whenever you use another type of snare and you want to build this kind of channel strip, just find that root frequency of your snare and boost that a little bit, if it needs it of course. And over here is the root frequency, and that's what we boosted. Then I'm adding a little bit of a soft clipper, and this just makes it sound a little bit more louder, just pulls up the gain a little bit. And this is just there to make it a little bit more, have a little bit more volume. And then the saturation is where it gets a little bit more interesting. I used 3 different type of bands, and what I did with the lower and the higher one, well, I basically did nothing. And the middle one is there to boost that, or to saturate that root frequency again. And what this does is it just gives it a little bit more fatness and a little bit more body to that snare. So it's a subtle change, but if I turn it on, I know if you really pay attention, you can hear this. It's just a little bit more oomph to that snare. And then I have a basic compressor, and this basic compressor just helps it, making it a little bit more loud. And the change that it makes is small but noticeable again. Just makes it a little bit more snappy. And then we finish it off with an EQ. That EQ is just cleaning up the low end from the snare, and that's it. The difference between a snare channel strip and a clap channel strip doesn't need to be that different. And what I did actually is I started off with a snare, and after that I did the clap. And as you can see, when you look at both these channel strips, it's actually no difference in plugins that I used. And the only difference that's happening is over here we boost a little bit more higher because claps are a higher sound. And we did the same with the saturation. It's just saturation a little bit higher so that you get a little bit more full of a clap. I'll just turn on the channels one by one so you can really hear how that affects the clap. So the basic clap sounds like this. And let me just put it in a loop. Basic clap sounds like this. And then we put an EQ on it. Nothing much. Then the clipper again to up the volume a little bit. And then the saturation again gives a little bit more beef. There's some more body, gives it more warmth. And then that compressor is just there to make it a little bit louder again. Just glues the entire clap a little bit together. And then I have a basic EQ that just cuts off the low end again. I just have the basic rhythms for the build-up. So we have this snare and this clap. And then I balance out the volume and make sure that it's how I want it to sound. So this is just the plain basic and a snare and a clap layered. Then it gets a little bit more interesting because then I did some sound design for the riser. And I just want to briefly walk you through how I make risers on my own. And yeah, the fun thing about making risers is that you can almost do whatever you want. As long as it's a rising sound that kind of builds some tension, you can just go wild. And what I did, I'll just take away, or I'll just show you the basic riser first. This is the end result of that riser. I just went for a little bit more of a different type of riser this time. And the reason I like Serum is because you can just use these LFOs and put them to like 8 bars and just make it a salt kind of wave. So it pitches up, put this on the chorus pitch that you have over here and make it pitch up 12 semitones over here. So it pitches up an entire octave, or maybe you do it a little bit more, 24 semitones, like I did in this case. And that just makes the riser sound already. You don't need to put any automation in that, and that's what I like about Serum. Then I basically just picked some random waveforms, and these random waveforms, they already sound nice, they just sound normal, and just pick a waveform that you really like. And I like this random one, and especially when I move that wavetable a little bit, as you'll hear, it's just changing the sound a little bit, and I like that. I'll just move this wavetable a little bit quicker so you can hear what this does. So it just makes a little bit of a movement in between as the riser goes up. And I actually automated this with another envelope over here. Then I added just a plain waveform because I felt we needed some normal waveform to create a more solid sound. You don't have to, but I felt like it. And this is always just there to give it some body and kind of give it a more normal feeling. Then I added a filter on top of that, and this filter just opens up as the riser is playing. But as it's a bandpass, it just plays a little bit with the sound before I put the effects on there and actually distort the sound so it moves even more. Let me take away that LFO that makes it move, and we'll come to that in the end. So first it just sounds like this. It starts off really low, but as it's rising higher, it's getting more noticeable. But it's real gentle, and of course we want it to be a little bit more rough, and that's why I added distortion on there. So that's a little bit more fun already to listen to. And before the distortion I added a little hyper, and this hyper just created some more extra movement to just make a little bit more of an interesting kind of riser. So without it, just the resonating tone that pitches up because the filter is moving up, and with that hyper it just added some extra texture. It just sounds a little bit more intense, and I like that. Then after that I put a phaser in front of the distortion, and just this phaser makes the sound move even more before it gets distorted. So it's just small things that add a little bit of texture to this riser. You can even, if you want, put this behind the distortion, and then you'll get this even weirder type of sound. But I wanted a clean, kind of distorted riser. So this sounds nice, but it's just still a static tone, and I didn't like that, and that's why I added this fourth LFO on there and I told you I'd come back to that. And what this LFO does as it progresses, each little step over here is just speeding up a tiny bit. So we start off with 1/4, a movement of the cutoff over here, and this just gives it a pace already, like the riser follows a little tempo, then it goes double that tempo, then it goes double that again, and then double that again. So as you'll see, this cutoff filter is going to move way faster as the riser progresses on. And so yeah, this just progresses through the tempos that the LFO has, and that just gives more tension. And then I added a little bit of a cutoff so the sound wouldn't get too high. If you hear this, the ending of this riser, it just sounds like noise. It just doesn't sound clean anymore, and I didn't like that. So this is the ending of that riser before I added that cutoff. And that's just not really what I wanted, and without that it just sounds like this. It just sounded a little bit more clean to my ears, at least. So what we have then is we just have this snare and riser pattern that we have, and that's the basics for this build-up and just probably any kind of build-up that you want to make. So that we basically just have this. So that's just the snare and the riser, but of course when you make a build-up for a track, you kind of want something to have fill the low end as well, and I used the bass drum for this from the Vengeance pack. And I make this one pitch up a little bit, so it rises that low end as well, and it just builds a little bit more tension, and yeah, I like that. Then I added a little bit of a filter kick, and what this filter kick is just doing is we have this kind of normal build-up right here, and we aren't sure what kind of genre it really is. Maybe because of the tempo you'd say it's hardstyle, but there's no sound design indicating that it could really be hardstyle build-up. And what this filter kick does is just, it gives it so much more drive. So when you have a basic build-up and you have your kick ready, just maybe filter it and put it under there and see if it actually gives a little bit more drive to that build-up, because it's surely gonna fill it up a little bit. This is how I filtered it, and I just made a little bandpass in Pro Q, cut out some of the lows because we didn't want lows because the bass drum's already there, and I cut out some highs because I didn't really want the highs to be too harsh. So it sounds like this. And this is where, for me, really this build-up became a little bit more alive and really just way more building tension. It just gives so much more drive with that tail, and you already really notice, or you already know what's gonna come after that build-up. You just know how the kick is gonna sound, or maybe you can even play around and just change the kick up entirely. So what we did after that is we have this solid build-up, we have some good percussion, but there's nothing special, and especially because I just wanted to make a build-up, we don't have any atmospheric big sounds yet that we could use in a break and that's gonna play on over the build-up. So I just added this basic choir, and the choir just plays the same note as the kick. That's an A, and yeah, it's just EQ'd a little bit. Give it some reverb, and it just sets a little bit of the vibe for this build-up. So you get this a little bit more full. It's already filling it up a little bit. But then we kind of miss this leading sound, and whenever you're making a track, try to have some kind of leading sound. It doesn't need to be anything funky. It can be really basic sounds. but I found this arpeggiator in Flex, and what this arpeggiator just did it for me. It just works, and it's a nice rhythm, and it's not something you hear that often, so I thought I'd use it. So it's just a preset, and it's a weird sound, but I like using some weirder type of sound so you can have a little bit more of a character that's built up into your build-up as well. So with these two background sounds, you already build so much more than just a build-up, you know? When you have your chords or something from the break and just a pad behind there, it's fun, but when you add some kind of extra sound, it just really lifts up that build-up to another level. It just makes it a little bit more unique, and that just really helps you stand out more. So this is without, and it's fun, but it's nothing really crazy. But with that arpeggiator, also because it's an arpeggiator, so it plays a rhythm, it just gives more drive and just more character to this build-up. So that just really helps putting the character into a normal build-up, and in my opinion, that's really what can make a normal build-up and just a better designed build-up stand out. Then after that, I just made a screech, and this screech is just a plain hardstyle screech. I wanted some kind of screech that just a basic hypersol, detuned hypersol, a little bit of distortion on there. And it just doesn't really do anything special. Just some 8 voices and 16 voices, getting a nice tone with that detune, and playing around a little bit with the automation on the pitch, so that we get a little bit more of a fuller sound. And that sounds like this. So there's nothing too special in here. Just take any type of screech that you want, or any type of build-up or drop sound that you want, because the idea about this was that we have this build-up, but we don't really have part of maybe the drop that's going to come after it. So I thought I maybe preview a little bit of that sound during the build-up, with a cutoff, so you can already hear that rhythm of the screech, but it's not fully audible yet. So with that cutoff, it's sounding like this. And just gives a little bit more fullness and rhythm to that build-up, and a part of that, it just previews what's gonna come after that. So this screech is just already previewing what we want to kinda let the listener get used to for that drop. So probably when we would want to make a drop behind this, we get some form of this rhythm and put it in there, so it kind of sounds familiar for the listener. And to me, build-up is never really done without crashes. So I got a crash from Drumazon, and I put some reverb over there, and the reason I sample it with reverb is because with that reverb and the sample, you can just cut it and you can keep that reverb clean. And if you use multiple samples and they play somewhere near to each other, the reverb is just gonna mud up just like this, like without cutting that sample, and just gonna lower the quality of the mix down, in my opinion. So that's why when I use some big sounds or crashes with some high amounts of reverb, just sample it, and if you want to loop it, just sample it and make sure that it just stays clean while it keeps that huge reverb. See, that reverb isn't annoying that it's not looping. You don't even really hear that it's not looping. It's just drowning in reverb without being noticeable that it's a sample and it's getting looped. Especially in these faster ones. you don't really notice that it's a loop, and it just keeps that reverb way more clean. So this build-up, just like I said, build-ups aren't done without crashes, and crashes just help building that tension so much. And you can just hear how this crash just makes that build-up flow so much better. But even then, when we have a funky sound and have a nice screech or something to go for with the drop, you kind of want to have something more unique. Over here we still just have 1, 2, 3, 4 with counts with the drum, count with the snare, the clap. It's just the same rhythm, and to make that a little bit more funky, I like to add, not just this time, I normally do that with my tracks as well, just some kind of loop, some high-end loop or some mid-loop. Just look where you have some room in that mix, and in this case it was a high-end loop, and this just gives so much more funk to that build-up, to the rhythm part of the percussion side of the build-up, you know? So without this and just focusing on the rhythm, you'd have this. So this is really boring, and with this high-end loop it just creates some more funk in there. It just gives you something to fill in between the counts that the snare and the clap and the bass drum just play. And when you add this in your build-up or some form of a sampled loop, or maybe make your own loop, it just really makes that build-up come to life. Just listen how this just makes this build-up so much more exciting when I add this loop in there. So without it we have this, and with we have got this. So that just makes it so much more full, and I really like that. I really like to use sampled loops for that, and you don't need to go too crazy with these loops. Just find something that gives it a little bit more drive. Then, of course, we don't want this last bar to be completely silent, so I had to figure out what kind of fill I wanted to put inside of there. And I took this snare, and this snare, it's not a basic snare, but it's a well-known kind of snare sample. It's a kind of dubsteppy snare, I think. And what I just did was I put a disperser on here, so that just plays with the phase of the sound, and a shade. And what I like with shade is you can just do so much crazy stuff. I can just select this type of comb kind of filter, and this just really makes a snare sound weird and really bass heavy, and probably clipping on this audio. But when I add some distortion after this, it's just gonna sound so gritty, and I just like that. It's just really, really distorted, and I just fucking love that. So yeah, to finish this up, I sampled the snare and I put it in here. And I took the kick because I wanted to make some kind of kick roll. And this kick roll is just really basic. And with that snare it sounds like this. And that really works already. But I wanted to do something weird with that kick roll, because why not? So I just added some random kind of volcano preset, just Stevie stutter somewhere out of here. And just be random, just try to give a little bit more different texture to this build, to this kick roll. And that just gives a little bit more of a unique flavor. And that's how you get this kind of build up. And then after this you'd add your kick, screeches, and make an intro or make an anti-climax for your track. Thank you for watching, I hope you learned something, and I hope to see you back soon. Cheers!